Hi, I'm Matt Carpenter, host of College, the podcast. Today's a really cool episode. We have a kind of a huge guest in our space, Rob Franek from the Princeton Review, joined us today. This guy is super entertaining, super knowledgeable. He's been in this space for an awful long time. So we had a great conversation, got to know a little bit about Rob, and then we really sunk our teeth into the Princeton Review's 50 best value colleges, both public and private. We talk about the methodology they use to come up with those, and then we look at put the spotlight on a few particular colleges that we think are interesting, but also not necessarily household names. So thanks for joining us today. Please like us, please follow us. All right. Well, listen, thanks for joining in today, for our college podcast. Really excited. Special guest today, very sought after guest, very kind to take the time for us little people here. So I have Rob Franek with me today from the Princeton Review, and Rob is somebody that is, I would say, pretty close to a household name in this space. You might recognize him from TV. I mean, how many times have we done a Today Show now, Rob?
This will be my next one will be 38. Yeah, it's been
38.
a
All
long
right. So
time, Matt.
pretty.
Yeah.
He's a sought after guy. So we're lucky to have him today. We're here to talk about. We'll learn a little bit about Rob. I want to learn a little bit more about Rob. We've been fortunate enough to do meet a fair amount of times and do events like this, but we'll go another layer deeper, and then really the focus, as we talked about, will be these 50 value colleges, right? And I want to unpack those because I really like that perspective and kind of mindset, totally aligned with ours. And for those of you who don't know, actually, we have a formal official partnership with the Princeton Review, College Aid Pro, and that's a big deal for us. We're really excited about it. So, Rob, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Matt, this is a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm so delighted to be here. My mom used to say, if people talked too much about themselves, she would call them I specialists. I did this, I did that. And it was the worst curse she could ever levy on you. So I will speak as much about myself as you wish, but I feel like my mom is right there in the ether. You know what I'm saying?
We'll see. We'll see if we can thread the needle here and keep her happy, but also learn about you as much as you're willing to
You're
share.
funny.
And I'm especially grateful because Rob's joining us from his vacation spot down in Provincetown. We're both in the Commonwealth today, but
That's
not
right.
not exactly right next to each other outside of taking a boat.
Same ocean.
So, Rob, let's kind of start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I'm from New York City. I grew up in the Bronx, and then my parents moved to New Jersey. Yeah, so I went to high school in New Jersey, college in New Jersey. I went to a little school called Drew University. I'm a trustee, not longtime trustee member at Drew. So yeah, definitely New York, New Jersey guy. And then I moved back to New York City right after graduation, which is now 30 plus years ago. And yeah, it's been a great ride. I still think New York City is the best place for a person that is a continuous student because you'll never know everything about the town. So, which I enjoy that idea
Right.
of there's still stuff to discover. Yeah, great city.
And so you grew up in the Bronx, and what age did you move out to the burbs?
I was young. Yeah. My sister, my brother, and I we all moved out. We started at a little Catholic school in Franklin, New Jersey, and yeah. So
Where are you in the pecking order with your brother and sister?
I'm the oldest
Same.
out of yeah.
Cool. So you were the oldest, and so I went to Catholic high school in New Jersey, and
Oh
then
yeah.
talk to us a little bit about, because this is always fun for us, for at least for me. I kind of like to hear about how you and your family navigated the college kind of like
Oh
process.
sure.
For example, did you always know you wanted to go to college? Was that important at home? Was that always on the radar? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm first generation college, so I should say that out loud. So education was, I mean, to say that it was a focus is understating it. I mean, it was known that you were going to excel in school and that you were going to move onto college. And then beyond that, if you wished. But so education was super important to my parents, and it somehow got, sort of ingrained into all the kids as well. Um, so I went to competitive schools, and certainly, the Catholic schools that we were in. I ended up at a Methodist college, which, my parents to this day still think I'm a heretic, that I kind of switched gods, but but it was a great choice for me. But for me, and I work with a lot of students, as I know you and I both do, Matt. Um, my parents, although well-intentioned, because we were first generation, did not have the literal vernacular to
Uh-huh.
have a conversation of substance about college.
Got it.
Um, and they wanted to, right? I mean,
Hmm.
they were smart, super smart people, but they just didn't have that comfort level there. And I feel like even the through line from now many years of working Princeton Review and many years working in higher ed, that I feel like part of my job is to translate how the college process is knowable and navigable for students and parents. Whether you are first generation or your parents went to school, you're either learning this process with your kids or you're relearning this process with your kids as you're going through it if you're not first gen. So to me that just makes a lot of sense. I think it would have been helpful to my parents, and I can see I do a lot of public speaking for Princeton Review, much of it live. So you can see when people are nervous, and I feel like I can smell fear from my own students at 5 blocks away for the SAT, ACT, AP exams, blah blah blah. But the same thing, I can smell that same sort of insecurity and the stress and the worry that students and parents have around the process. And I'm like, my job is to diffuse it quickly so that you can have a conversation of substance about school.
Yeah, it's funny. What was popping up in my head, and you almost did for those anybody that's not watching might be listening to this. The way that we try to describe it, our first job is to get the shoulders down, right? Get everybody to relax, get those
Oh,
shoulders down. Like just try to have some levity. This is stressful. This is overwhelming. How am I going to make this happen? It's so confusing. Like, let's just bring the temperature down, and then we can kind of get started. So again, your hand gesture is something that we talk about all the time. Like, let's just bring the temperature down,
I love it. I
and then we can
love
get
it. That's
started.
super.
Right.
That bring your shoulders down, and that
Right. Right.
I see the visual in my head, and that makes such good sense. I tell my husband Mario, if I don't grab an audience within the first 7 to 12 seconds that I'm there, then I failed.
Right. Right.
And grab them so that they can't look away, so that they feel that they're part of this conversation,
That's right.
so that you feel that you're on the same page and you can actually communicate without the stress and worry.
100%. Right. And that's the challenge, right? Because again, we all get it. If you're super tense, it's tough to like take stuff in, right? You're not a sponge. It's the opposite. You're clenched fists, right? So, all right, Dia, that makes a ton of
Got
sense.
it.
Now, so you went relatively close to home. You went to Drew. Why Drew? Was that a place you were always kind of drawn to? Were there other considerations? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Oh, sure, sure, sure. Oh, I appreciate this question. My high school, everybody was, or most people went to Notre Dame. They went to Seton Hall in New Jersey. They went to Fairfield. They went to, generally speaking, the Catholic college, which there are amazing Catholic colleges and universities. And I applied to some of them, but then also since we were in New Jersey, you applied to a lot of Pennsylvania schools. So I applied to Franklin and Marshall and Bucknell and Dickinson, and so they were kind of usual suspects in the size of the school that I was looking for. But funny enough, when I was a sophomore in high school, I went to a little school called Pope John the 23rd, and my our principal asked me to cover for the school newspaper this conference that was going on AIDS and HIV that was hosted at Drew. But this is like 1987 or 86, somewhere in there. And they sent me from my little Catholic high school to cover this conference, and it was held at Drew. And first of all, I thought it was amazing that my Catholic school sent me to cover an AIDS conference, but be that as it may,
Yeah.
and when I got to Drew, I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw all of these people, many of them students from universities and from high schools, and then these amazing speakers. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now I'm thinking about college in a completely different way. You're with these brilliant people. You're coming together for a common cause, a theme of the day. That happened to be AIDS and HIV, but it could be anything. And I'm like, now I'm really, it just imprinted, Matt, on me that this place was very special, and it happened to be an hour from my parents' house. So and I just never shook it. And even though I did my due diligence and applied to other schools, I really thought when Drew accepted me that this is a place that I could thrive as a young person, and I loved it. I mean, I talk about finding best fit schools. Without question, I found my best fit school when I was 17 years old. Now I visit all other schools, and I'm like, okay, in my advanced years here, I think about other schools now, but at the time it was so the right fit for me.
That's so cool. Yeah, you got to get on campus, right? You have to just get on these campuses to kind of feel it, feel the vibe, right? You can't. It's important to look online and take the virtual tours and all that, and check out the high level statistics and things like this. But getting on campus is a difference, and especially getting on campus the way that you got on there to have an experience like that. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
if you got to take advantage of those, right? Because that's when you really understand the place, I guess, right?
1,000%, 1,000%. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And how, if at all, did you and or your parents, you as a family, think about the financial piece of the puzzle when it came to college? Was it a conversation? Was it comfortable, given it was you were in state? I mean, just talk about that
Yeah,
piece.
it was generally uncomfortable. My Drew was incredibly expensive. We had already gone to expensive schools, and again, my parents were never burdened us with the idea of how stressful this was to them until after I had graduated from school. Because I think we just didn't talk about money. And I felt like, my parents worked, they were professionals, they did well. But these were struggles. There was just a lot of kids, a lot of tuition to pay. I was only the first one in school. I got two other kids, two other siblings behind me. So it was a struggle, but I felt like if my parents would have been able to talk about that with me,
Hmm.
again, the stress level I could feel my shoulders going back down, but it was just something that we didn't discuss. And I later found out that my dad every couple of weeks would drive to the financial aid office at Drew and say, "Listen, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we
No
going to do
kidding.
this?" And I didn't know that until, well after I had graduated from Drew. So yeah, it was, and I worked throughout college and I worked through summer terms and I worked through, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I took any job that I could. And I felt like that's a learning experience for me as well. I don't regret any of those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I had a similar experience, right? Of just like, we didn't, and my, my parents doing the best they could. Sounds like similar, right? Both working, but completely stressed out about the financial piece of the puzzle. I probably wasn't stressed out enough, quite frankly, as an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit like selfish and whatever, or naive is probably in there too. But when we look back at it, and we've unearthed it like a decent amount of times, because obviously what I've, my career path kind of, if we could all go back in time, I think, and my parents would say this especially, is like, we would just be more open, right? And again, it wasn't their fault. They both can't, they didn't know how to talk about money, right? They even talk about, as a young couple, they were like, what, we're adults now? Like, how do we even talk about this with each other, much less our kids? And so again, if we could go back in time, and this is, take this, everybody has their own experience, but I think just being more open and transparent, even if it's like, hey, we're not exactly sure how we're going to pull this off, but let's talk about it and figure out what our resources are, and educate ourselves on what these different colleges might cost. And as you and I know, but it's not obvious to the general public, or most of it, like, those $100,000 colleges might end up being the most affordable for your family, right? So
Yeah.
don't necessarily dismiss those. So, anyways, it's just, yeah, I think the long and the short of it is, it's just probably better for most families to just, let's put our cards on the table, right, and have this
Yeah.
conversation. And by the way, easier said than done, right? We weren't really able to do that, so I'm not preaching, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. But in hindsight, you're right. To lay your cards on the table, to talk about this as a family, to talk about, what are the options here, and
Mhm.
what are the expectations? I hear you, and it does sound like we grew up very similarly. So
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
yeah, no, totally. Believe me, I was like, yep, 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 yep. Okay, so this is probably a good transition, good segue, right? When we think about, obviously the financial piece of the puzzle, the affordability factor, but the experience as well, right? And then the opportunities after graduation as well. Like, something I say almost every day is like, yeah, I can give you hundreds of colleges, or I can give you tons of money. But
Yeah.
if your kid or the student's not interested, if they're not a good fit, who cares? That's kind of useless information. We got to marry the two, right? And therein lies the challenge, I guess. But I really like, what you guys do with this. You're ranking the 50 best value schools, and you do it
Yeah.
with the public schools as well as the private schools. So if you could just, number one, just like take us through your process a little bit, and specifically, like, what's value mean, right? There's a lot in there. So how do you guys articulate that? And maybe we can pick
Oh,
off
totally.
particular colleges and go from there.
Yeah, totally. And we've been doing this project, Best Value Colleges, for a long time. I used to write a book on it. I'm responsible for publications at Princeton Review as well. So our publishing partner is Penguin Random House, Bertelsmann Empire, the largest publishing entity on the planet. So it gets a lot of reach. And
Mm.
we did it probably for the first 10 years, Matt. We used to write a book annually called Best Value Colleges, and we profiled 200 plus schools in the book. The methodology hasn't changed, though the book has gone out of print. But we've been keeping the project alive, very vibrantly alive on our website. I'm like, okay, so the $12 book didn't work out, but the information, the currency, the utility of this idea of finding a school that you're not going to have to mortgage out your future to pay for. These are things that speak to students and parents. So anyway, so thinking about, we could have written a book or done this resource and just called it Best Cheap Colleges. But I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you can find the schools that are going to give you a ton of money, but the truth is, if you can find a school that's going to be valuable to you. So we first looked at academics, right? So are you going to be challenged in the classroom? Is this going to be a competitive environment for the student? So is this school truly superlative when it comes to academics? That's the first line. Then we look at cost, right? Real sticker cost. But as you just articulated, when people get nervous, certainly now when we have many schools that are topping the $100,000 mark. But okay, so let's get over the sticker shock and let's look at how schools are actively bringing down sticker cost to something that's affordable for the average student and parent.
Mhm.
And that to me is the real value of the product, project, right? So we're looking at that, but that's kind of math, and that's available to a lot of people. And we have that data. You guys have that. I mean, this data is available. It's hard for I think a average student and their parent to find all this stuff. So we have a job to do, and we do a lot of that homework. Okay, so then there's that, and then we're looking at outcomes. So we partner with PayScale.com, and they've been our longtime partner for this project. So we're looking at um, well, one, our students being employed. That's from the Career Services Office at the universities. And then with PayScale, we're looking at their what are they called? As soon as they're getting hired, so their first career jobs, and then their mid-career salaries. So exiting school, what's their salary, what's their job, and then mid-tier career, where are they financially and where are they in their job? Are they satisfied with where they are, not only financially, but what they're doing professionally? So
Mhm.
that's the nutshell. There's 40 different factors, but Matt, those are the kind of big buckets that we're
Sure.
looking at. And to me, that I like that idea of saying value can mean any number of things to folks. So, but to give them these articulated channels, so the way we're helping them define it, because career is probably out there. Is it going to be a return on your investment? Are you going to be happy doing the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah.
How much debt do you have upon
Yeah.
graduation? So that's the act that we're providing. Yeah.
No, I like it, right? Because again, and I think value is a great word that kind of encapsulates all those things, right? It's am I going to have a great experience? Am I going to be challenged academically? Am I going to have opportunities when I graduate that align with why I'm at this college, right? And I'm going to be compensated competitively. I'm going to have a great career trajectory, and I'm doing all
Yeah.
that without hopefully taking on an insurmountable amount of debt, right? So that's hard to put in one word. So I kind of like that with value there. Now, maybe just and I'll put you on the spot a little bit, so don't worry about it if
Yeah.
you need some prompts or a little, but starting with the private colleges,
Sure.
we look at the top, there's some kind of very household names, murderers row type colleges that are very hard to get into, right? But of this list,
Yeah.
are there any that come to mind that might not be these, the Princetons of the world, for example,
Oh,
that
sure.
are noteworthy to you that you'd want to highlight and, talk about a little bit how they ended up there?
Oh, yeah. Totally, totally. And I did do a little, just cheat sheet here. So this is a good prime to pump on this. But so out of Best Value Colleges, there's 209 schools that are there. Overall, there are more privates than there are publics, in the list of 209. But there are seven ranking lists that we do. One is just best value college for public schools and for private schools, right? So that's 1 to 50 on each of those. And you're right. There's some usual suspects, particularly at the top of the list. Georgia Tech, Princeton, for the public and private schools. And there's are awesome schools. But the six other ranking lists, one of which is best schools for financial aid, Now Williams is up at the top. Many students certainly have heard of heard of Williams as it is super competitive. But number four on the list is Reed College. And
Mm.
now Reed is I mean, it is competitive, but it is a relatively small school, but it's sticker cost, Matt. And this is where, as you noted at the beginning, people can get riled and get stressed about this. Their sticker cost is a little over $87,000, but their average need-based scholarship is a little over $50,000.
Mm.
So most out-of-pocket students will be paying around $36,000. When we think about that, still a lot of money,
Of
but
course.
it's certainly not $87,000,
Mhm.
right? So I just want students and their parents to know about that stuff. And again, we're in a unique position to be able to dig down and do a lot of this homework so that students and parents can have a conversation of substance about Reed or other schools that could be doing that kind of work. UNC Chapel Hill, certainly on this list, it is number one on best financial aid for public schools. I mean, for an in-state tuition, it's $24,000 sticker cost,
Mm.
but the average need-based aid is almost $20,000. So students are paying out-of-pocket costs a little over 4,000 bucks. So again, those are in-state students, but it's important to and I keep thinking about now this visual of allowing people's shoulders to come down, and now they're hearing that schools out there are giving out a great deal of aid, to make school actually affordable.
Yeah, 100%, right? And it's like we can't say that and repeat that enough because it really is counterintuitive. It's
Yeah,
for any of the major purchases we buy. The sticker price has a lot to do with what we're going to actually pay, right? When a house goes on the market for X amount of dollars, like whoever gets into that house is going to pay something around that mark price. Same with a car you want to buy, whatever. Where again, we just have to completely change our mentality that the most expensive product could be the most affordable for you, right? Or at least what appears to be the most expensive. And I also, I think people get kind of boxed into their region of where
yeah,
they live, right? And that's totally fine. And some people are just, it's not a good fit to go too far from home. But I love when people kind of expand their minds a little bit there, at least initially in the search. And I think Reed College is a great example because here in New
yeah,
England, we have we're fortunate to have, so many colleges here and a lot of these great private colleges that aren't just Harvard's, but the NESCACs or, the Williams, Amherst, Bates, Bowdoin, Colbys of the world. If you have these great students that are loving these schools, but they're like, you know what, I want to see something outside of New England. You have the Reeds of the world, right? You have
yeah,
this in Southern California, the Pomonas and Claremont McKenna's and the Occidentals, right? That are very similar in how competitive they are
sure.
in these, smaller kind of liberal arts settings, beautiful campuses, right? And guess what? Give a ton of money, are super generous with financial aid if you're eligible for financial aid. So that's why, again, too, I think it's important to just have cast a wide net when you're starting this process, right?
God, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that idea of casting a wide net of schools, just even at the beginning, let there be no taboos. Geography, listen, you're not going to be held to this. When you're thinking and you're doing your research, and this is one thing that I'm super proud of at Princeton Review. Certainly, Best Value Colleges is one of the things I'm very proud of. But I like the idea of, and we've been doing this for a long time, this idea of talking to students at the Claremont McKenna's and the Pomonas and surveying them, right? So we're in a unique position. And part of the best value colleges algorithm is also asking students, are they satisfied with their financial aid package? That's another thing. You want to ask the customer, you want to ask the students, know your audience, right? But thinking about digging down into what is life going to be like at Vassar or Bowdoin or Pomona and basing that on what students are saying about their experiences academically, campus culture, financial aid, career services, the things that we know matter to us and to students, and giving them that information so that they have a comfort level. They can have a conversation of substance about it. And that feels, well, it feels very Princeton Review like to me. We've been doing this stuff for a long time, and I'm very grateful that we continue to be able to do it, but to create an informed public, right? Financially is a huge part of it, but also campus culture and the other things about it.
100%. And another thing that I like about this list of value colleges is that I would argue that one of the hardest kind of like buckets, so to speak, of families to when we talk about affordability with college are these
Yeah.
families. we call them internally kind of bubble families, right? And I would articulate that as families that are they're not eligible for traditional need-based financial aid, or at least not much, but they are certainly not in a position to start cutting checks for 100 grand a year or anything close to it, right?
Right.
Times 4 years, times 4 kids. So, a percentage of you listening might be like, oh, wow, I can get a great deal at, Reed or Williams or whatever. And they go to, maybe they use our net price calculator, or they go on our platform and say, oh my goodness, my student aid index, my SAI is, 102,000, and Williams doesn't give merit-based scholarships. So we want to go to Williams. We're paying full rack rate here, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
there's other colleges, great colleges on here that are excellent with merit-based aid, right? I'm looking at Barnard. I'm looking at St. Olaf, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at Union College in Schenectady, right?
Oh,
Awesome, awesome colleges. And they're
yep.
going to say, right, if your student, right, is the right fit there, they're going to say, we don't care how much you make, parent or parents. We want your kid to come to our school, and we're going to give a financial incentive via
Yeah.
merit-based discount, right? So I just want to say that out loud because it's important that I think a lot of parents, you probably hear this all the time, Rob, that are like, this isn't fair. My student aid index is too high, and I'm going to be paying full sticker price everywhere. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. And I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. You're right. For families that are not going to get aid or not a great deal of aid, maybe
Right.
their child can get student work study or something like
Right.
that,
Right.
but they're not going to be Pell Grants. They're not going to be
Right.
um and I could imagine, and I do often have these conversations with students and parents of the importance of doing well in high school, doing well in your SAT, ACT, AP exams, right? Because we know that those spur merit-based dollars. And to me, listen, I've been teaching for the SAT and ACT for a long time, AP exams for a long time. And I'm the first one to say the SAT and ACT are bad tests, but I am also the first one to say these are very important tests, even in our test optional environment, because they spur not only academic admission to schools, but for scholarship dollars when they cross the streams with GPA and SAT and ACT scores. This is undeniable. It is undeniable. And to me, I just don't want students to be hoodwinked or their parents to feel, hoodwinked as well, that they're just not getting all the information. So that's where doing well in high school and standardized tests, that's your job because it can actually qualify you for many merit-based scholarships. Not all, but many, as you know.
It's such an important point. I'll kind of double down on it, and I'll tell you how we coach it, and I'm curious if
Yeah.
you coach it any differently. But our recommendation to everybody that's going through this process, right, families, students, et cetera, is at least take the tests or one of the tests, right? Even if you're self-proclaimed and historically not a good test taker,
Yeah.
our firm recommendation is take it and see where you're at, because something that I've only learned over the last few years as we've got more, a deeper partnership with you all and admissions
Yeah.
experts on our team, I'd kind of always thought, and this is what I really think the general public thinks, like, my kid's going to take the SAT or the ACT. We're going to see how they do. And we're either going to send the test scores to colleges or we're not going to. But
Yeah.
for the vast majority of folks, you're going to send them to some schools and maybe you're not to others, right? It's so school specific. And to your point, and we this is a lot of what we try to show within our software. It's like if your ACT goes from a 21 to a 24, that could mean the difference of tens of thousands of dollars per year at so many colleges. Or it's one of these things where your SAT goes from a 27 to a, or sorry, ACT goes from a 27 to a 31, and now all of a sudden you're able to get accepted into this college that meets 100% of financial aid. So again, it's such a straight line
Yeah.
between test scores and obviously admissions, but also the financial piece of the puzzle. Now, again, I don't want people to get discouraged if you're bummed out and you feel like you're not a good test taker here,
Sure.
but I wouldn't really walk back anything I said. So I'm curious if you coach it any differently. Do you tell some kids not to take the test, or how do you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we're uniform in the way that we're advising students, like take these tests. Why hobble yourself for the,
Right.
if you're going to apply, most students will apply between 5 and 7 schools nationally. We know that many of the cohorts that go through, the College Aid Pro channel, certainly Prince Review channel, might be applying to a few more schools than the average students across the nation. Um, but if one of those schools requires the SAT or ACT, then the choice is clear. You have to take the test. But as you say, take the test. And then you can pick and choose, right? Test optional means you have the option to withhold or submit. And you can make that choice as a family. You can make that choice as a counseling community with your counselors back at school or independent counselors, whatever. And that to me just means that you now have options that you would be eliminating some of those options if you didn't take this test. And I recognize, we have it's a big part of our business to prep students for the SAT and ACT. I also tell students SAT, ACT, AP exams, these tests are absolutely coachable. So if that's the thing that's holding you back, if that's the thing that you're nervous about, put that out of your mind. Like, get a good tutor, get a good teacher. And listen, I tutor a lot of students, tutor a lot of students, but part of it is bringing down, as we talked about at the beginning, some of the stress levels, saying you can do this. Here are some strategies. These work. You're going to be fine, and that could actually translate into dollars and admission.
Yeah, again, to your point, right? It's self-serving for us to say, hey, everybody, go get a tutor, take the test, whatever. Specifically with College Aid Pro and Princeton Review,
Yeah,
but I will stand tall in the fact of most families. We're always looking through the ROI kind of goggles, right? I always
yeah.
have on my ROI goggles, and again, for most families, you're gonna get a return on that investment. Again, via financial aid, via scholarships, via just more opportunities, more doors. So that is something that again, I can say with a straight face.
Oh, yeah.
And you said it in the beginning, you don't like these tests or whatever. They're not good tests, or however you articulated it.
Yeah.
In my own personal experience, and obviously this was a minute ago, but I think it still holds up. I was fortunate enough. My parents made the investment to get me a one-on-one tutor, and it's like the SATs are more of like understanding that, and I'm sure the ACTs this way. I didn't take it, so I can't speak personally, but like
Yeah.
I learned right away. Okay, this is more about like tricks of the trade, right? This is
Yeah.
more of like understanding how this works than a true perfect measure of your intelligence, right? So
Oh,
that's what.
1,000%. Yeah. And I feel like this is when for any of our students at Prince Review. But the thing is being comfortable around that test, SAT, ACT, honestly, any standardized test. Um, Part of it is understanding the timed environment. Part of it is understanding the instructions that are being told to you, understanding what to expect on that exam, let alone the strategy on how to take the test, is a time savings. To me, now you have a comfort level. You're saving time. You feel confident because you know what the instructions are like, you know what the timed environment is like, you know what's going to be asked of you in that test, and now you're going to dig into some of the strategy to actually answer the questions. But if you were just going into a test cold, which I recognize people can do, but the vast majority of people are likely going to perform better if they know the testing environment. They've taken a bunch of practice tests. They got feedback on those practice tests. They know where they have strengths. They know where they have to improve. To me, that is the value of test prep. That's the value of just teaching in general, is to focus on the things that acknowledge the things you've done well on, but let's focus on the areas that you have an issue with, or that you need improvement on. And that is metered in a reasonable way to approach any test, but certainly for standardized tests.
100%. It's great advice. All right, let me just kind of two more questions in closing here, and a little bit I'll
Yeah,
bring. I forgot to ask at the beginning, and again, I'm just curious
yeah.
myself. Maybe others will be, but and I guess this first question is a two-part question. How long have you been at the Princeton Review, and how did you make your way there? What was
Oh,
the kind of trajectory for you?
what? Actually, I think it's now 26 years. I think I started in August, of 1999. So yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've had, Matt, it doesn't feel like that long, and I appreciate that I've been able to do many, many different things that I think would have fallen well out of my job description, early on. I got to do a ton of media for Princeton Review. My old boss, John Katzman, who started the Princeton Review. Actually, funny enough, I listened to a podcast with him on it yesterday, talking about college costs and things like that, which I'll send you. He's a great guy, and he hired me, so I'm still grateful to him. But that idea of, I remember him telling me early on, you got to get out, you got to visit schools, you have to take any speaking opportunity that comes your way, whether it's television or podcasts or being with students and parents, because you are going to be hearing, listening, seeing what, you know, the value that you're bringing to folks, but more importantly, where they are nervous, where they're worried, where they're stressed. And if you know that, then you're going to be able to create content, resources, instruction, conversation that brings down the energy level or the stress level. That is just, I learned that lesson a long time ago, and I have made an entire career out of saying to students and parents and counselors, I see you and I hear you. We're in a unique position. Here's what you need to know, and here's the stuff that you don't really have to worry about. But we have you, we got you, and that feels like a good teacher to me and a counselor. Anyway, blah 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 blah.
You do a
yapping
great
too
job
much
with
about
it.
myself.
I can
Yeah.
attest to that. You do a great job. I'm in the back of the room taking notes. You're chilling me out, and I'm not even going to college, Rob. So
Yeah, good.
okay, last question for you here, and I ask this to most folks we have on. So you went to college yourself. You had your own experience, right? Pros and cons, kind of you and your own family, as we talked about, and then you've had this unique position to be somewhat the part of so many families, so many students college experience, right? Kind of like a fly on the wall for it or whatever. You fit into that somewhere. So based on that, if you, what's some advice that you would give to students kind of and or parents that are just starting this process, right? Based on your personal experience and your professional experience, they're all getting ready to go through this for the first time. Is there any kind of particular guidance that you might say, hey, look, it is somebody that's been around the block. Keep this in mind.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. Number one, you can do this. Like I tell the students and parents, or I'm going to do it through body language or just the conversation that we're having. This process, just like the SAT and ACT, the college process is knowable and navigable. You are going to be fine. There are 3,000 plus four-year colleges in the United States alone, let alone international schools. Not just one of them, but many of them are going to be good fits for you, but be a school that you would be proud to go to. And the opportunity here, some people might look at it as a challenge, but I look at it as an opportunity here, is to be given the time and the vernacular to have a conversation about what fit means for us. Like, is Bowdoin going to be a fit? Is Williams going to be a fit? Right? And to be able to have the conversation, to me, that is the college process because you are matchmaking, right? You are matching yourself with that school and they with you. And that feels, Matt, not like a burden to me. And I think for the majority of students and parents, when you get them confident, they get their confidence level up, they're excited for that process. And to me, no, that's a good one. And the other side of it, and let's just to acknowledge the finances, and these are big broad brushstrokes, you know this, but $180 billion out there in aid, that's a lot of money. And billions of dollars are given up by schools themselves, as we have alluded to, but some of the biggest funders of our college or students' college education, other than parents, are going to be the schools themselves for the merit-based scholarships that they're giving out, as well as need-based scholarships. So just to sort of acknowledge the pain points and the stressors that students and parents have, but to give them the confidence that there are numbers of schools that are just fabulous places academically that I think could be great fits for many students.
I love it. I want to end on that, Rob. I
Yeah,
think
man.
I think that's perfect. I think that's a good kind of stump speech to
That's
end
good.
on. I really appreciate you taking so much time, being so generous with your time, especially on vacation. And again, as always, I'm always learning new things. And yeah, brother, I'll shoot you a text if we're going to be in P-Town in a couple of weeks. But you
Please do. Please do. Matt, this is a
enjoy
pleasure.
in the meantime, and it was great to see you again.
Good to see you, my friend. Be well. Thanks again.
You're up.
See you, man.
Okay, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, if you enjoy at least some of our stuff, please like us, please share us, please follow us. Today's episode was edited and produced by Eileen Campbell, and we are very grateful for our special guest, Rob Franek from the Princeton Review. We'll see you next week.